on this episode of Raising the Wild Ones podcast.
We have our resident Hebrew scholar, the one and only Joel Justice. What's up?
The one and only.
Hey guys.
Insert applause.
Insert applause here.
But an ancient author would be far more concerned with what theological claims are being made about who their God is, why he creates, who humans are in light of who this God is. Like, those are the questions of purpose. In Mesopotamian culture, they have a group of sages that are responsible for this, that are semi-divine figures that are described in ways that are similar to Nephilim.
Nephilim, or the sons of God, had man bags when they were coming down from the mountain.
Yeah, and they used them to bring the crazy...
They had man bags.
Yeah.
Stuff.
You're saying it's actually Pandora's bag instead of Pandora's box.
It was like how to build pyramids.
How to build pyramids.
Raising the Wild Ones podcast.
Are you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready to
Sure.
start.
What are y'all gonna do to me?
Okay. Welcome to Raising the Wild Ones podcast. We've been talking for a little bit. We have our resident Hebrew scholar, the one and only Joel Justice. What's up?
The one and only.
Hey guys.
Insert applause.
Insert applause here. You know, we referred to you in another episode, and the guy was like, I'm going to have to talk to Joel. Did anybody ever randomly talk to you?
No. Nobody did.
Okay.
And I have to confess, I didn't listen to the episode either, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
Thanks a lot, Joel.
You're welcome,
man.
I'm just trying to keep people humble around here.
Yeah. Hurts a little bit.
Well, I won't lie. I gave Joel a primer for this episode, and this primer for this episode is we're not going to tell you what we're going to talk about in this episode, just because some of the best random, just good conversations I've had with Joel have been conversations that never intended to be biblical conversations. Like, I had my favorite one so far was in the lakefront at camp, while Joel is like wearing like this life vest just floating around, and I'm like sitting on a lifeguard buoy, and we're having this really in-depth conversation about theology, and it should have been recorded. That would have made a great episode. We're not going to talk about that today, but we're probably going to throw a whole bunch of Hebrew stuff at you if you're totally good with that.
But
and
first,
just see where it goes. Ooh, yeah.
But first, we're going to throw some dad jokes at you. And we're going to do the thing where I'll say them, and you and Dustin there try not to laugh, and whoever breaks first, I guess, loses.
Oh, no.
And whoever wins gets absolutely nothing other than like the dad joke and bragging rights. Yeah, y'all can.
Whoever
make
wins
fun of the other person
gets a Redneck Theologian coffee mug that we're totally going to do one day.
Wow.
Yeah, one day, maybe. All right, y'all ready? You
Yes.
can't break. You got to be straight faced.
I don't like my chances, but okay.
You don't like your chances. All right. Who was the greatest financer in the Bible?
Who?
Noah. He was floating his stock while everybody else was in liquidation.
I'm trying real
Nothing.
hard. That was a good one. That was a good one.
I can't because I see Dustin is the problem.
Okay. Dustin almost broke, and then Joel lost.
Seeing Dustin try not to laugh is actually what made me laugh.
Dustin won, Joel nothing. Okay.
Ah, dang. I'll have to focus. I'm going to not even look at you anymore.
I know.
Look over on the other side.
What do you call a lazy kangaroo?
What?
Pouch potato. You don't get it? Okay.
I mean, I got it, but I'm just trying really hard not to laugh.
Okay. What do you get when you cross a cow and a shark?
What?
I don't know, but I don't want to milk it.
Okay, that one.
Dustin broke.
Okay, I'm not really good at this, Joel. I think you're going to win.
It's tied.
Flying colors.
Yeah. Do y'all, I know Dustin does. Joel, do you like to shoot guns?
Yeah.
I get my handguns from a guy named T-Rex. He's a small arms dealer. Dustin broke his.
You put out the good ones today, man. I won't lie, though.
Part of it's not fair is because I'm not a dad and Dustin is. So.
Oh, yeah.
But I will say the
He's
best
probably more
dad joke
susceptible
we've ever heard on this podcast was like 2 episodes ago, and you said it, Caleb, and it was the faux drizzle, like, right?
Yeah.
When that was.
Why does Snoop Dogg need an umbrella for drizzle?
Fortress. I was like, I had to tell Lindsay that one. I got off the podcast and I literally went, Lindsay, I got a dad joke for you, and it's a good one.
I know I told
Oh, that's
several
pretty
people and
good.
they lauged, and then I told my wife, and she was
She didn't laugh at that. Wow,
She didn't laugh at that. That's good stuff.
that is good stuff.
Well, all right, Caleb, you had a few questions earlier. Do you want to start us off with a Hebrew question?
yes. I get to ask our resident Hebrew scholar some questions here, so I'm excited. One of the things, and I actually mentioned this to you last time we talked, so you may already kind of have an idea of this. I don't know, but we talked about earlier, like months and months ago, we got into discussions about new earth versus old earth and the Genesis, the creation story, and some things like that. So my first question for you, as far as what the Hebrew word for day means in the creation story. So, and I looked this up, and you can tell me if I'm going to say it wrong, but I think it's yom, the word yom, YOM
Yom.
is
Yeah.
yom. Okay. So the word for day in the Genesis story, what does the actual Hebrew, what does that lend to interpretation as far as what an actual day meant to that writer in that story? I guess is kind of what I'm asking. And also, we compare it to, say, um, for instance, and I heard this somewhere else where they were kind of comparing the word day in Genesis and then the day in the Jonah story, where Jonah was swallowed by a whale and he was in the belly of the big fish, for 3 days. So
Mhm.
they were saying, well, we look at it in this instance and say that, well, it's okay, it's a actual 24-hour day or whatever, but then we look at the creation story and there's all these different interpretations of it. So, and I thought that was kind of an interesting question, as far as why do we look at one in one instance and as a like 24 or 12-hour day versus the creation story, where it's, some people interpret it as like a 24-hour day, some people interpret it as a million years. you know
Yeah. 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 There's a term for that. Uh, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but yeah, you'll hear, especially people who like would identify as old Earth creationists would oftentimes you'll hear them say something like, um, well, day doesn't always mean like a 24-hour period. And they're right in some ways. When the word yom is used in the Hebrew Bible, it doesn't always mean to what we would think of as a 24-hour period. Um, Sometimes it can be used to refer to just a period of daylight, right? Which would not be a 24-hour period. So
so like
that's
sunrise to sunset. Yeah.
yeah. And I think you probably can see it like referred to a similar sense in Genesis 1. Um, I have to, but I think it would carry a similar sense to that. Yeah, he called the light day, right?
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
it's in Hebrew it's yom, like he called the light day. Um, so
So
it can
like,
refer to just the period of light. It's not 24 hours per se.
yeah, so like in Genesis 1:5, it says God called the light day. So you're saying
Mhm.
that's where that can be just that daylight period. And then the darkness he called night. So the evening and morning were the first day.
Mhm.
So that, I guess in that one verse, is that two different uses of the word, of that yom, where it's the light day, and then there was
Yeah. So
evening and there was morning. So like that's two different uses of that, the word day, just in that one verse.
yeah, you could say because it's not hard to see how you could use it to just mean the period of light he calls day, and then later on he calls both morning and evening day.
Yeah.
Um, that could bear a different sense, or they could have in mind like the periods of morning and evening where there's still light, and they're measuring. That's how they're measuring time, right?
Yeah.
Morning, and then when you roll back around to evening, it's up. But yeah, so there's slightly different senses there. It can also just mean the 24-hour day. Like there's instances where, so like that's probably what's happening at the end of 1:5. It's a 24-hour period. There's other times where it carries that sense, but it can also, so that's low hanging fruit, right? Um,
Hmm.
if that was the only argument you could make, people would be like, okay. But for old earthers, usually what they're thinking of, or old earth creationists, like usually what they're thinking of are instances where it can refer to a period of time, that um, some would claim it can refer to like an indeterminate period of time. Therefore, when it's used in the creation account in Genesis 1, it could be, thousands or millions or billions or trillions of years. The problem with that is there are instances in the Hebrew Bible where yom can mean period, like a longer period of time. So uh, it can be the word yom can be used in specialized constructions. Um, so when you say that somebody's really old or somebody's really old, you would say something along the lines of that, like he had he had come he had come in the days, something very literal like that, but it's an idiom for like he was old. He'd seen a lot of days, right?
So, like when we start talking about day and you get into the Noah's account of it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, is that like kind of on the same deal? Like, was it literally 40 days and 40 nights? Or was it just because I've always heard the idea of like that's just saying it rained for a long time.
Hmm.
Is it the
Yeah.
same kind of word that's used there that's used earlier in Genesis? You know,
Um,
we're making him
yeah,
think
I
now.
mean,
Look at
I
that.
think it would be the same words, 40 days and 40 nights. Um, I don't know. I don't think you'd be dealing with a different usage there. Um, so before I give away where I'm at,
I can
um,
guess.
the so like the word day can also be used to refer to maybe indefinite periods of time, um, where you can just say like the days of Adam, and that actually means his lifespan, right? So day doesn't mean the 24-hour periods of Adam, right? It or the daylight periods of Adam. Like it's just talking about generally the period of time he was on the earth. Um, Sometimes you can say like, and it was many days or something along those lines, and it referred to a very long period of time, which is kind of what Dustin's getting at with the 40 days and 40 nights. Usually there's not a number attached to it. Usually you would just say days. Um, there's also other idioms. You can say something like the day, literally the day, but it's a way of saying today in biblical Hebrew, like this day. Um, it can be used with various prepositions to mean different other things, but the point being is in those usages, it's almost always plural, or it's accompanied by another noun, such as the days of so and so. Another classic example is the day of the Lord. People will look at that and say, well, that's not a definite time, 24-hour time period. It's referring to generally a period of time when the Lord will return, um, or will come to judge the wicked. Um, but still, you're dealing with a very specialized usage of the word day. When I read Genesis 1, I don't see anything grammatically that would be in those passages that would indicate a specialized usage that an ancient reader would encounter and say, oh, this is referring to an extended, indefinite period of time. So when it's being used in Genesis 1, I do think that the author likely has in mind either a period of daylight or a 24-hour period, but one of those two very closely related meanings. I think you're reading too much into what the word can mean if you're saying only based on the usage of the word day that the author intended to communicate that it was, you know, billions of years that day one happened.
So, would you be an old earther or a young earther, Joel?
Um, so the short answer is I don't know
Plot
because
twist.
yeah,
I would
Plot
get yeah.
I
twist.
so my issue with this is I'm no scientist. I don't know enough about, science, natural sciences to adequately deal with the question of what's going, how does Genesis 1 relate to science? I
Yeah,
don't know
and
enough about
that's
science, but what I do know about uh, Hebrew, which is still not much, but it's more than what I know about science.
it's more than
And
us.
it's,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
and um, when you, especially when you go read um, other ancient accounts of creation, their own creation stories, some of which we know are older than like what we encounter in uh, the Bible, right? Like older when they were at the very least written down. Um, they will, they're very different, and that when you first read them, that's what's the most striking. But as you encounter them some more, you start to realize like, wow, there's some similarities here that don't seem to just be a coincidence. Um, and why I say that is um, what what we when you start to read these other stories, you begin to realize that Genesis 1, especially Genesis 1, is interacting with other creation stories that the authors would have been aware of. Um, and they're making the point of the document isn't to give a material origin of everything. Um, I mean, it does do that, but an ancient author would be far more concerned with what theological claims are being made about who their God is, why he creates, uh, who humans are in light of who this God is. Like those are the questions of purpose, um, and then the concepts of how does this God order, like bring order to chaos.
Yeah.
It's those concepts that would really hang on the mind of an ancient author. And so our questions of like, well, mechanically, how does this work? I think if we were to ask an ancient Israelite author, like a lot of the questions that we ask of Genesis 1, they would be like, what?
So
Do you
so you're
just
kind of
not
talking
do you just not get this?
you're talking like the
Yeah.
Babylon creation myth and like those sorts of things and those older creation stories that have similar ties like almost every creation story does have a great flood at some point, and
Sure.
and and
And
and like
that's a
and
flood
those
story.
are
That's not even
And
not
so
even
it's not
necessarily
even
a
like
so
going
creation
like
farther
some
story.
of
back.
so like the Bible's creation story is almost talking against some of these other creation stories and saying, hey, this is the actual true creation story. This is the correct one.
Right. Yeah. And their concern isn't like, no, ours is true because God did it in 7 days. I mean, they might have believed that. We don't have an ancient Israelite to ask. But what I'm trying to say is what they're far more concerned with, and what I'm confident an ancient author would want us to take away from the text is, wow, like this God didn't have to fight any chaos creatures. Like he didn't have to kill any dragons to do
Yeah.
this. Like he just spoke and created. They wouldn't say, well, how long? Did he really mean 7 days? Right? And then, so how old, like in a very mechanical sense, is the earth? They would say, did you read the story that I wrote?
Yeah.
So they would
So
almost like the how many days question almost wouldn't even be on their radar.
I don't think so. No. Um, I think they would be more concerned with how God is creating the world, um, and how he's portrayed as bringing order purely with his own voice by virtue of his own power.
So I
Um,
guess a question I have, does the text lend to it being a parabolic, or like not necessarily fictional, but like more
yeah,
of a story to combat those others, or does it lend more to a historic account? Well, not necessarily a scientific account, but maybe not fictional is
yeah,
a bad, not really
yeah,
what I
and that's
wanted to
our
say, but
that in our modern conception of things, like when we use the word myth, like we mean something
myth
that's
versus
not true.
history. Yeah,
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 like we see a dichotomy there. Ancient authors, um, like they they don't even conceive of they don't conceive of history unfolding in a way where like the actions of God and the gods are not involved, right? So for them to write history is to write these kind of things that are primarily concerned with who is God, how has he acted in history, and who are we if God has acted this way? Um, which are very human questions to ask of a story. Um, but I think ancient authors were in a lot better position, like intellectually and theologically, to ask or to not be troubled by texts that are uh, a lot more like mythological.
So
Um,
this may be a really totally out there theory, and I may be off base on this one. I've just kind of thought of it over while you were talking there. But when you start talking about like these other creation myths, and you talk about how they all come out of chaos and so on and so forth, right?
mhm. Yeah,
I mean, is that just kind of like a symbolism of just almost a creation timeline of these other creation stories really didn't even come into effect till after, like, till during maybe the sons of God issue that's going on. And so like in the chaos before Genesis 6, is that where like a lot of these creation myths get their thing? Like I was reading, just looking at the Egyptian creation myth, and it says there was a time of period, but the primordial mound of earth emerged from the watery chaos and the sun god Ra, and it's
uh-huh.
like it was very intent on this idea of watery chaos. And so it's like, does that
Which
just kind of
is
show their hands at it came after, God spoke order, or is that
I don't
just
know
them
because the Bible says the same, not the exact same thing, but a very similar thing,
I
right?
mean, yeah, I guess it does, yeah.
The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. The deep is a watery reality, a watery something or another. We just don't use the word. It's not the normal word for water. It's a specialized word for like deep chaos, deep water that's associated with the forces
Deep.
of chaos. So like the ancient Israelite story of creation sounds more like an ancient Egyptian story than it does um, some of our like scientific recreations of what actually happened with quote unquote what actually happened, right? I'm not saying I don't want you to hear me saying that this is not it's true, right? What I'm pushing back on a little bit is the idea that we as modern Westerners, we associate truth so much with another word that we use, which is fact, right? Um, but our own perspectives and ability to discern these things are so limited. Ultimately, we're still brought to a point where fact doesn't take us as far as we would like it to. And what we still need is truth. And I think the author of Genesis is far more concerned um, with answering truth questions instead of necessarily fact questions. That doesn't mean so. A helpful way to think of it is Genesis 1 like video camera footage of how God created the world? Possibly, right? But that question is not a question that an ancient author is asking, right? They're asking, who is this God? What is true about this God? What's true about us? And they're interacting with other ancient stories to make truth claims about who God is. And that um, those are the questions that we should ask first before we impose other questions that are still important and good to ask, but they're not primary. Does that make sense?
So,
Okay,
so
that makes
essentially
sense.
just diving into this text and saying, okay, this is telling us that it's a 7 day period and just moving on from it's kind of a shallow view of what is actually going on in that passage.
I wouldn't say it's a shallow view. I would just say it's a very modern,
Okay. Yeah.
westernized view that doesn't really take into account what an ancient Israelite author would be intending to communicate, or what kind of questions would be available to an ancient author. Because when you think about it, it is somewhat presumptuous to come to an ancient text written by an ancient Israelite and say, well, uh, solely on the basis of the inspiration of Scripture, which is true, but solely on the basis of that, this was written in a way that someone, you know, maybe 3,000 years removed from this writing, I am going to be the primary audience that understands it.
Yeah.
So it's the questions that I just naturally bring that should be asked.
Now,
That's pretty
this
presumptuous.
okay, yeah, I got that. This may be a little off the wall, and if I'm totally out there, you just be like, Dustin, you're totally out there. Just sit down and be quiet.
You're
But
totally out there, Dustin.
I'm not going
Just
to be
kidding.
quiet.
Sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Caleb. Sorry, Caleb. But like we get Daniel 10, right? And so we get in Daniel 10 where it talks about Gabriel being delayed 21 days, from delivering a message to Daniel by the prince of the kingdom of Persia. And
Mhm.
and when we get like that idea, it's almost like some of these areas. I mean, I know this is like a weird can of worms to open, but it's like some of these areas may have like these different sons of God or maybe something that's over them. And so, kind of going back into these creation myths and all of them being similar, would these creation myths be similar because those entities that are over them, maybe giving the myth down, have some knowledge of the actual creation story? That's like probably a ton of speculation there. And I'm shooting the bull a lot here, but I'm like, it makes you wonder. It's like, are they all similar because they have the same source text to go off of? Like they were all aware of how the actual creation event happened. So that's why all these events are similar. And it's not necessarily like the people were aware, but like the entities over the people. Like that's,
Isn't that the principalities over certain areas?
oh yeah,
That the
principalities and
term,
stuff. Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah, so Paul will use the term that gets translated as principalities. Um, yeah, I mean there is a um, so in Deuteronomy 32 you get a text that is debated amongst scholars that seems to possibly refer to um, spiritual beings being assigned, specific geographical boundaries, right? That they're associated with, and that these beings are not good, right? So, um, and Daniel, I think, is pretty clearly dealing with that idea. The problem is the text in which that from which that claim is made. There are textual variants. So, like the Greek version of the Old Testament, the
The
Septuagint,
Septuagint. Yeah.
will read differently there. Um, I do think that the Hebrew, the one that we have in Hebrew, is better, but like I think that's more likely the original reading. But your question about are there so is your question, are you asking,
I don't really know what my question is.
are there
I was just kind of
similar creation stories because essentially fallen spiritual beings that were influencing
maybe
ancient
that's a
cultures decided
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
this is the
That's
way
kind
that
of what I'm
we'll throw them off the
Move my
scent.
microphone over here. Sorry.
I mean, yeah, I mean I'm kind of yes, that would be a good idea, a good way to put it. Like and they've all experienced maybe the actual creation story or they're like, "Hey, let's make all our creation stories similar to try to make it look not true." Or I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a very big question and a large ask and see, this is why we didn't prep you on anything, Joel, because we want you to shoot from the hip.
Um, well, I mean, yeah, that's really hard to answer with what I know. I it's it's possible. I wasn't there. So, what I can say is that um what Daniel will refer to as the Prince of Greece and the Prince of Persia, right? In this text in Deuteronomy 32 and other texts we've looked at in our last episode that talk about there being a group called the sons of God that aren't that are not just human, like they seem to be spiritual beings, and these spiritual beings seem to be in some way resisting God's plans for the world. Like that, I think that is a reality, and I think that that is also the reality that Paul recognizes, like what Caleb said when he talks about principalities. You especially see it in Ephesians. Like he'll, so yeah, I mean, I think that is a reality that's out there. Some people would disagree with me, but it's a difficult leap to say that that is actually the reason why we have these different creation stories, right? What you can say, I think, and not be too out over your skis, is that they're certainly influencing the other um, belief systems that, like, if this is the true reality, they're certainly influencing um, like other people's desires to create idols and worship other gods and um, chase after like imperial ideologies and these kind of things. And that is also pretty thoroughly biblical. Um, I don't think it's any coincidence that you even get references to those concepts in Deuteronomy 32 in the same like passage. So um, yeah, so the creation stories, I don't know, but the ideologies that drive the creation stories, right, and some of their distinctions from the Hebrew Bible, yeah, are definitely being influenced, I think, by spiritual powers that are opposed to God. An example of that might be in the Babylonian creation story, the Enuma Elish, um, where um, Marduk is like kind of the patron deity of Babylon, and in a lot of ways, it's a story about how he institutes order over the cosmos, and what he has to do is fight. Uh,
Oh, yeah. I know where you're going with
what
this.
were you going
Sorry.
to say?
No, no, no,
No,
no,
you
no.
say it.
I
You say it.
is he fights his dad, right? Or he fights like
Well, no, he fights a chaos monster.
he fights the chaos beast. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, who is in a lot of ways like the deified chaos ocean, sea,
Yeah.
and she's referred to as Tiamat, or I don't know Akkadian. But a lot of, I mean, most scholars would recognize that Tiamat is a cognate with the word that we get in Genesis 1 when it says, um, the Spirit of God was over the surface of the deep. Tahom is the Hebrew word. Tiamat is the monster that
Oh, that's
Marduk is
interesting.
fighting, right? So you see, like, these similar concepts, like like the thought world is there, but the claims they make about who the gods are, right? Where Marduk is having to do battle with this creature, and in Numa Elish, humans are created to be slaves for the gods, because there's different classes of gods, and the lowest class of gods are like, we're tired of doing all the work for the stronger gods. So what if we just made a race of slaves to do all that for us? So they kill a god and use his blood to make they use blood
Oh,
and soil to make humans, right?
maybe that's what I was
So
thinking about earlier because I was like, that was the creation of they kill the other god to make
yeah, yeah. So
people. Yeah.
right. And so like you can see stuff where you're like, oh, you know, oh yeah, they're made of like earth, but it's blood and it's the blood of a slain god.
Hmm.
Uh and it's being used to justify and prop up um hierarchies that exist in the social world of ancient Babylon, right? That are evil, that are twisted and marred by sin. And so, um, again, why would why would any modern Westerner know this, right? How would we know to ask that question? Um, but once you start to see it, you start to say, oh, there's interaction going on here that I was unaware of, that an ancient person probably would have been,
Fairly
more aware of.
literate of. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't be literate, probably.
Well,
The
but not
person writing
literate,
it would
but
be, but like common people wouldn't, right? But they would be aware, like they would
they'd be
talk
aware.
about it. They don't have Netflix, so what else are they gonna do?
Just gotta sit around and talk about this.
Yeah. Does that answer
I
your?
mean, I guess I won't lie. I was just kind of like, I mean, it's just thoughts and ideas and stuff that I kind of had mulling around in there,
Yeah,
and It's the kind of random stuff I ask Joel just when I see him on a Tuesday or something, you know.
Yeah.
And
And the other thing you see in Genesis 1 through 11 that relates to that is the author of Genesis 1 through 11, which like most people recognize as a distinct unit in Genesis, uh, is the Israelite author is incredibly suspicious of uh, of how like civilization is coming to humans. And so he's interacting with a lot of stuff that we don't have time to get into now. We can talk about it more later. But that that does deal with the idea of spiritual beings being responsible for bringing like arts and civilization to humans. The Prometheus myth in like Greek culture is the one that we're more familiar with. In
You know, and
Mesopotamian culture, they have a group of sages that are responsible for this, that are semi-divine figures that are described in ways that are similar to Nephilim. Um, and so there might be something going on there. And but what's clear is the ideology of the ancient city of um, and then ancient trades like music and metallurgy and things that in the ancient Babylonian world were viewed as like gifts from the gods that were instituted and vested in cities to instill order in the world. The Hebrew Bible is very, uh, they don't shy away from opportunities to cast doubts on and so the way they do this is like, oh, this person from the line of Cain, he was a blacksmith, right?
yeah.
Like this guy who's very clearly not a great guy. Oh, he instituted this, right? And so you're you're dealing with a counter ideology in the Hebrew Bible that's interacting with the theology of the ancient world
weird,
to
weird,
say,
qu- weird
go
question
ahead.
thought then for you, Joel. Then how does the book of Enoch play into all that? Because doesn't the book of Enoch go in and say like this fallen angel gave this and that fallen angel gave that? And
Yeah.
and I get it. Like I'm Dustin's not going to sit here and like recount the merits of the Book of Enoch, but it's just how does all that play into it, especially with like Second Temple Judaism and
Well,
and
and
the idea
also,
of
or well, I was going to say, and also like all these different cultures, like the Aztecs, the Mayans, you talked about the Greeks, all these different people who had these myths or legends of people coming in and bringing this special technology, kind of going back to the fallen angels, like, and there's a show on Netflix. I can't remember what it's called, but like where he goes around to all these ancient sites, and like it's crazy how many of these ancient sites have pictures of a person holding a bag, and there'll be like a picture of a person holding a bag in South America, and there'll be a picture in the Middle East and Africa and India. It's like all like, and it's crazy how similar all these pictures are. You know, I wonder how kind of how that ties into the whole, like we were saying with the Genesis 6 account and narrative, and then Book of Enoch, and these people bringing this special knowledge to these people.
Yeah. I I don't know enough about like Mesoamerican cultures to like even comment
I don't either,
on that.
but I'm going to
Like I
comment
don't,
on it.
you know more than I do, by just by the mere fact that you've seen pictures of them holding bags. I don't even have that. I believe you, but uh,
I'm going to look it up real quick, maybe.
but I mean, so what with the Enoch tradition, um, these these connections that the Israelite author in of Genesis is making, that is kind of, throwing shade at some of the Babylonian theology of um, creation and like human civilization. What in Genesis is maybe implicit, the Enoch tradition, some of it just makes explicit. And so some of it'll say, like, they'll just make very strong connections where it's almost inescapable. Like, oh, yeah, they're very much aware of Mesopotamian, like, sorcery and are very much associating that with, these passages and are reading them into the passages in Genesis. Um, and then there are other things that are also still, like, just below the surface. Um, But yeah, the Enoch question is a good question, and I don't know enough about Enoch. Um, there are books that I can point you to, but I don't remember enough off the top of my head to start listing examples. But both Asael and Semihaza are um, depicted in the Book of Enoch as, which are kind of the two main evil figures in the Book of Enoch. Um, they're very, very much associated with like metallurgy and the introduction of magic is like is one of the main sins that they're accused of, and so they're very clearly making um, like a spiritual connection, a connection with spiritual beings, introducing these ideas.
I
Gotcha.
just looked it up real quick, and it like I can't. It's not letting me share my screen, but like if you looked up different ancient cultures carvings of man holding bag is what I looked up, and it's like Anunnaki deities in Samaria, Mesopotamian art, in Mexico, Quetzalcoatl, Gobekli Tepe has them, Assyrian, um, like all over the world. There's these like carvings of these different beings like holding a bag, and it's like crazy how similar it is around the world.
So what we can gather from that picture is that Nephilim or the sons of God had man bags when they were coming down from the
Yeah, and
mountain.
they used them to bring the
They had
crazy,
man bags,
yeah, man
and
purses,
in their man purses was just random assortment of
crazy
stuff from like
knowledge.
crazy knowledge to just makeup and
You're
There
stuff.
was a
saying it's
book
actually
on,
Pandora's bag instead of
yeah,
Pandora's box.
and it was like how to
Yeah.
build pyramids.
How to build pyramids.
Yeah. So, and that's where my knowledge is like there are entities in ancient Mesopotamian traditions that are associated with the bringing of this knowledge, like you just said. I think like Anunnaki or I probably just mispronounced that. Are one.
Oh, for sure.
There's another group called the Apkallu, which I alluded to earlier, that are associated with a similar tradition. Um, and so um, those have been those have been discussed pretty widely in like biblical scholarship, and there
Well,
does seem to be some connections.
and I've also heard some really kind of like weird stuff. I used to watch a show. I'm gonna show my hand a little bit here. When I was like a teenager, I watched the show Ancient Aliens on
Oh yeah,
on the History Channel. You remember that thing? Because it's the dude with the really big hair, and he's just like aliens,
aliens.
you
I'm
know.
gonna be
But
honest.
and they
I watched that one time, and my family like made fun of me for years afterwards because of that.
and
I
look
was
at
like,
you
I
and look
watched
at
it
you now,
once.
Caleb. You're on a podcast that's talking about the Anunnaki now. So
Yeah, I know, right?
it's
Jokes on them.
you've jokes on them. But it's like, and I remember talking of like they would always talk about the Anunnaki, but then they would always like bring it back to, well, they're the aliens that came down. And it was very interesting kind of on that show when you put it side by side by like the biblical narrative that they were never willing to touch. You know what I mean? It's like it seems almost like mainstream, I don't want to say scientists or something like that, but like it's easier for somebody to say all this weird stuff that happened. Well, that's clearly aliens is easier for somebody to say than, well, what if it's just, you know, the biblical narrative in Sons of God? It's interesting kind of from that perspective too, is that like aliens is a more plausible example than Genesis 6. So,
Yeah, and that show I was talking about where I saw that and learned about that was Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix. It's a big show, but the guy that does it, he's an atheist as well. Like he doesn't believe in the biblical narrative, and he talks about all these different cultures having flood narratives and
Mhm.
these myths of these people that before the flood or after the flood, I can't remember that, but would come and with this knowledge and like teach them all these crazy things. And that's how these ancient megaliths were built, and is kind of the theory. But they always come a little bit short of saying, well, every civilization has a flood narrative. And then somehow like civilization returns to this area and civilization grows after that. And there's this ancient knowledge, which kind of goes into some of that other stuff we've been talking about. And basically at that, they come short of saying, well, hey, every every civilization has a flood story. What if it actually was a real thing that
Happened.
happened? Like
Yeah,
what if it's an actual real thing that happened? And what if there was some sort of knowledge? I don't know. That's kind of out there, but
yeah. I mean, I don't know enough about again like Mesoamerican cultures and and all of that to really comment on it. But in the ancient, Near East, yeah, I mean, there's flood stories everywhere. Um, but it doesn't seem to be a mere coincidence to me. Uh,
Gotcha.
but again,
Yeah.
what's interesting, and I think what's the most importance is saying, okay, but what is your flood story? Like, who is it talking about, and what does it say about them? Um, Again, I think people like ancient authors would be really frustrated if you were like, so it happened, right? And I think they would be like, what?
Well,
Are you
Hawkeye,
asking if it's important? Because
Yeah.
it is.
well, awesome. Well, we're probably at our time here, but before we go, I've got to ask you one important question.
Mm.
You did so good because I think me and Caleb this whole time were trying to make you laugh by showing random objects on the
Did you
screen.
notice any of them?
And did you
notice
know
Yeah,
you kept
I
on
mean,
you kept
yeah,
on
like
rolling?
various melee weapons. Yeah.
Did you see
Yeah,
the
but
sword? Like
the
I
thing,
pulled
yeah,
up
I
a
did see
sword
this.
at
I
one
did see
point.
the sword, like a
Did you see
gladius
the
or something.
fish?
I did see the fish. Yeah. Here's the
Okay.
thing: is I grew up with Dustin as my youth pastor, so like,
So you're used to it. This
yeah.
is an otter, by the way. My son made an otter.
Oh,
That was the
nice.
most
Yeah,
interesting
it's
What's
actually
one.
really good.
what's the dangly part?
He's holding a shell, and the other one, I think it fell
Oh, he's
off. But
holding a shell. Oh, like because
used to
they
have
break them and
it used to have a rock on this one. I guess the rock, or maybe the rock set on top of it. But he would like one side was the rock, the other side was the shell, signifying breaking with the rock.
yeah. That's smart.
I don't know why we came up with that idea, but like
A little
we
lighter at
got
one point.
Is that like when did y'all like text each other?
I
So
did, yes,
the
in the middle of it.
the only
Yeah,
thing
A little
is
it's like,
lighter.
man, did I just say something so insane that they're like, get a load of this guy?
No,
he
I texted him and
texted,
said, "Hold up the sword."
hold up the sword, and then I was like just holding it like this, and I was like, that's really heavy, just holding this thing. It's
Yeah.
totally a core double-handed weapon.
So we were
Well,
trying to throw
man,
you off a little bit.
we're trying to throw you off. I will say thank you so much, Joel, for hanging out with us,
We
and
and we
oh,
didn't
this
even
is
get
fun.
into reform versus Arminianism.
Well, that's good.
So let's
That's
finish
good.
up. Are you a Calvinist? we asked
I'm
one guy
more.
that.
I'm. You just straight up asked someone that.
Yeah.
That's funny. I guess I'm more curious to if, because we started with your question about the word day in Hebrew and then just spun out from there. Did I answer your question about the word day?
About the word day.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I will say because I mean the questions we got on a couple minutes early, Joel, before we started recording, and Caleb gave me like 4 or 5 questions, and I thought, oh yeah, that's good. That's a lot to kind of go through it. And then I had kind of looked into a lot of stuff, and we talked about it too, a little bit about the divine counsel stuff. And I was like, we had like 3 or 4 different ways and 3 or 4 different questions. And Caleb had a whole stream of questions based on Job, at least like 2 or 3 that we didn't
Okay.
even touch. So, hey Joel, in like a month. You want to come, or like 2 months, you want to come back? You have an open invitation to our podcast at this point, just to show up.
You're
talk
a
about
resident
stuff.
Hebrew scholar, and you're going to put that on your resume one day. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you're welcome anytime. And which format do you like better, being prepared or just shooting from the hip?
I can say I like being prepared better. Um, but I don't know if you're going to give me much choice.
I mean,
We could let
being
you-
prepared was good podcast. I think this was good podcast too.
Yeah.
I remember sitting there. I'll tell the story, and I won't tell anything what we talked about because we talked about a lot of different stuff. But it was like we're in the lakefront, and I'm supposed to be lifeguarding other youth because there were no other lifeguards around, and I'm like the only lifeguard guy there. And am I paying attention to anybody? Not really, because I'm listening to
I don't know if you
Joel and this intense conversation.
I don't know if you should.
I don't.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
were
maybe
having
you
an
shouldn't be
conversation.
saying this, Dustin.
Hey,
It sure seemed like you
technically,
were paying attention. So I wouldn't have been talking to you if I thought that the children were at risk.
I mean, they were totally fine. They were not children. They were all adults anyway. They can save themselves.
That is
Actually,
true.
it's a
They were
terrible thing to
adults.
say. And nobody
Like,
drowned.
That is true. They were adults.
It was all our rec team. It was in between session 1 and session 2.
Oh, okay,
I am
that's-
pretty sure that at some point, like someone swam up to us and realized like the kind of conversation we were having. We're just like,
Yeah, I mean, it
swim
was,
off. Like, ooh.
Aren't they
If
all
you ever-
lifeguards anyways?
I think there actually
Yeah.
were like 3 or 4 lifeguards totally just randomly swimming, so we're fine there. So, well, thank you so much, Joel. Man, we've enjoyed this conversation, and we're gonna definitely have more with you and stuff. And you know what? My whole goal is to tell other people about you, so maybe other random podcasters will be like, "Hey, Joel, you're the resident Hebrew guy from the Raising Wild Ones podcast on my podcast," and you're just gonna like
Oh,
all of a
man.
sudden you're gonna write books, and in like 20 years you're gonna be like on some stage somewhere like getting an award, and you're gonna be like, "Thank you, Raising the Wild Ones podcast, for this awesome start that you guys gave me way back."
Thank you
in
for letting someone who's
2000.
not qualified to speak authoritatively about anything come on your podcast, pretend they know what they're talking about.
Just remember, when you accept that award, Raising the Wild Ones podcast gets exclusive rights to the interview after the award. So
Are you
glad
sticking with
said
that
it right.
name?
I don't know. Whatever
Okay.
podcast, whatever name we have chosen at the time,
Okay.
We may have gone through 5 or 6.
we may have just
I don't know.
continued to rotate through
Depends on how
names
long
at
it
that
takes
point.
you to get famous.
Are you even the podcast if you don't change your names like 8 times?
That's probably right there. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me. I love hanging out with y'all. I had fun. So
that's great. Thank you so much, Joel. Thank you guys for listening to Raising the Wild Ones podcast. I know me and Caleb are just a couple of redneck theologians, right? Kind of came up with that term a little while ago, and it's just kind of making us laugh. But that's really just what we are, right? Every single one of us is a theologian, sitting there and just think about the Bible. And me and Caleb are rednecks, so that makes us redneck theologians. And so we just thank you guys for listening to us. And if you want to just give us a holler and let us know about topics you may want to listen to, or things you may want to say, or if you have an idea for a guest host, or if you yourself want to be a guest host, just drop us a line. Just let us know. Just give us a ring on the old telly. Actually, not really. We don't have a cell phone number, right? But we do have an email, and you can send us an email, right, at raisingwildonespodcast@gmail.com. There'll be a link for that podcast down in the description. And so just kind of click on that and just let us know what you guys want to hear from us. And we like to hear from you guys too. We like to know what you guys think of our podcast. And so also just tell your friends, share it on social media. Just let people know when you're sitting down having a cup of coffee with your hunting buddies or fishing buddies. Just say, "Hey guys, listen to this podcast. It's these 2 rednecks, and they're kind of weird sometimes, but it's fine because they talk about some cool stuff." And so just let people know, and that's how the word gets out, and that's how it gets shared. So we just thank you guys so much for your support and for listening to us. And yeah, tune in next time for more from the Redneck Theologians.
Hey, Wild Ones. Do you love what you've been hearing? Our deep dives into theology, Bible stories, and the Word of God? If so, we need your help. For just $6 a month, which is less than a cup of coffee these days, you can join our Patreon community. It's a simple but powerful way to support our mission of sharing the gospel with as many people as possible. And when you join, you'll get some awesome perks like early access to episodes, detailed show notes, and even biblically accurate coloring pages you won't find anywhere else, trust me. Plus, we're giving 10% of everything we receive straight to missions, so your support goes even further. So click the link below in the show notes and join us on Patreon today. Let's keep raising the wild ones together.